I always knew something was a little off about her, but I used to call it fire. That thing in her eyes when she wanted something, a pair of boots, a front row seat at some concert, a spontaneous trip to Miami, and how she'd get it no matter what it took. Back then, I thought it was sexy. Powerful even. Now I think it was just the beginning of everything I missed. That morning started like static. No music. No conversation. Just that buzz of noise you don't notice until the volume's gone. She asked for my car without looking at me. Said hers was acting up again. Her voice was too casual, too smooth, like a line rehearsed. I handed over the keys. She left before I could ask why she'd already had the Civic in the shop 2 weeks ago. I watched her drive away, and for some reason, my gut didn't just twist, it turned inside out. But it's easy to ignore a gut feeling when you love someone. Easy to lie to yourself. Maybe she's tired. Maybe she's just distracted. Maybe. Around noon, I got a call from Joe's Auto. My Jeep had broken down in their lot. She'd pulled in, parked it like she meant to leave it there, and then, according to the guy on the phone, disappeared. Just walked off down the street before anyone could talk to her. I drove over in her Civic, pissed about the car but more annoyed that she hadn't called me herself. When I got there, Joe wasn't at the front. Some new guy, young, maybe mid-30s, met me at the counter. Tall, buzzed head, cautious eyes. The kind of guy who didn't speak unless he had to. He pointed me toward the back where my car was parked, then paused, looked me over and said quietly, "The camera picked something up." I didn't understand at first. "Camera? Your dash cam. We didn't touch it, but you might want to see the footage from this morning." Cabin cam caught audio too. I felt something slide down my spine. Not fear. Not yet. Something colder. Something quieter. I told him to play it. The video started as soon as the car turned on. The timestamp said 8:03 a.m. She was alone at first, still wearing that stupid hoodie she always said was her no-effort outfit. She pulled out of our driveway, turned on some pop garbage, sang along a little. Then, at 8:11, she pulled into an empty parking lot near some warehouse, killed the engine. 5 minutes passed. Silence. Then a guy opened the passenger door and got in. He wasn't someone I recognized. Tall, clean haircut, cocky posture. He leaned over, kissed her on the mouth like he'd done it 1,000 times, and she kissed him back like she'd missed him. Then they started laughing, whispering things I couldn't quite hear. She said something about leaving the car at Joe's to make it look real. And then they both laughed harder. My wife. Laughing. Using my damn car as a stage for her little betrayal theater. She dropped him off 3 blocks later near some bakery. Smoothed her hair in the mirror. Checked her teeth. Then drove to the mechanics and left the car like it was part of her plan. That was it. No dramatic music. No car chase. Just silence as I stood there watching the replay of everything I didn't want to believe. The guy beside me didn't say a word. He just let me watch. And rewatch. Until I finally turned off the screen and handed it back. Something in my chest didn't break. It detached. Like a wire snapping loose. I didn't drive home. I drove to her gym instead. She told me she had a class at noon. Zumba or Pilates or whatever. I waited across the street in the Civic, engine running, every window cracked, the dash cam footage still burning in my head like an infection I couldn't cauterize. I didn't know what I was going to do when I saw her. But I knew this much: whatever version of my wife I thought I had, she didn't exist anymore. And the version of me that let it happen? He died in that mechanic's office right next to the screen that showed me everything. She came out of the gym glowing. You'd think she'd just won a lottery or found out she was 5 years younger. Hair tied up, cheeks flushed, leggings like she'd walked off an Instagram ad. She spotted the Civic across the street, paused for half a second, and then started walking toward it like nothing was wrong. Like it was just Tuesday and I was her husband waiting to pick her up after her little stretch class. I didn't roll the window down. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. She opened the door, tossed her gym bag in the back, slid into the passenger seat. "Hey, baby. Why are you in my car? I thought you were working late today." Her voice. Her tone. It had layers. Casual on top, but underneath there was something off. Not guilt. Not even worry. More like calculation. She was testing me, checking the room temperature before she picked which mask to wear. I didn't say anything. Just stared straight ahead. She shifted in her seat. "What's wrong?" Still nothing from me. I let the silence crawl between us, watched it make her squirm. She hated silence unless she controlled it. Finally, I asked, "Where'd you go after you left the house this morning?" A pause. Too quick. She covered it fast. Straight to the gym. I had to cancel the car at Joe's. It was acting weird again, so I dropped it off after class. Why? That was her opening move. Lie first, then ask why. Flip the suspicion onto me. Classic. I turned to her. Finally looked her in the eye. You sure? You didn't go anywhere else? Another blink. A smile twitched at the corner of her mouth like it forgot which expression it was supposed to fake. No. Why are you being weird? I reached over and grabbed my phone, pulled up the dash cam footage and hit play. I didn't look at the screen. I watched her. First 30 seconds, nothing. Minute 1, her fingers curled on her thigh. Minute 2, her jaw tightened. Minute 3, the guy opened the car door in the footage. She reached out and slapped the phone out of my hand. It bounced off the dash, landed somewhere near the cup holder. What the hell, you went through my stuff? Her voice pitched up, sharp and loud like she was already on stage again. Why would you spy on me? Spy. That's what she went with. Not denial. Not tears. Not even guilt. She jumped straight to outrage like I was the one breaking trust. I stared at her. It's my car. She blinked as if surprised I had the nerve to speak. Then she laughed. Laughed. Short and dry like a breath caught in her throat. So what now? You gonna cry? Gonna act like I ruined your perfect little world? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The way she looked at me, it wasn't fear, or apology, or regret. It was something colder than all of that. Like I was a problem she had to manage. An obstacle in the way of her next story. She scoffed and leaned back. You know what? I was going to tell you. Eventually. But you've been so dull lately. Same routine. Same everything. I needed something else. Something that made me feel alive again. There it was. She said it like she was talking about buying new curtains. Something that made her feel alive again. I sat there frozen because what do you say to that? How do you respond to the person you built your world with looking you in the eye and saying you weren't enough? Not crying. Not ashamed. Just done. And that's when the Civic's radio turned on by itself, glitching from the old AUX chord. A love song. One of ours from years ago. She reached forward and turned it off without a word. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. I didn't drive her home. I pulled over and told her to get out. She stared at me, stunned for the first time all day. You're serious? I didn't respond. She hesitated, then grabbed her bag and stepped out, slamming the door so hard it echoed through the street. I watched her disappear in the rearview mirror, shrinking with every step, until she was gone. And still, I didn't cry. Not yet. Not there. I didn't go home. I drove. No destination. Just asphalt, turns, gas stations I didn't stop at. My hands were on the wheel, but it felt like they belonged to someone else. Everything did. My clothes, my name, the sound of my breathing in the cabin. Nothing felt real. The inside of that Civic still smelled like her gym bag. Perfume, sweat, that sugary lotion she used when she wanted to feel irresistible. It made me sick to my stomach. I ended up in the parking lot of a closed-down diner 30 miles out. The sign still said breakfast all day, but the windows were covered with paper, and the place was hollow. I sat there until the sun dipped behind the clouds like it was hiding from the same truth I was. I didn't call anyone, didn't tell a friend, didn't post about it. Because who do you become when your wife cheats on you in your own car, then tells you it's because you were too dull? What's the right label for that kind of man? You don't want comfort. You don't want logic. You want to scream, but the scream's stuck somewhere in your chest like a stone that won't move. My phone buzzed once. Her name on the screen. I didn't pick up. Then it buzzed again, a text. You overreacted. Let's talk when you're done pouting. Pouting. That word. I stared at it until the letters stopped looking like English. She didn't even try to lie about it anymore. Didn't beg. Didn't explain. Just minimized. Framed it like I was the one being immature. That's what burned more than anything, her total lack of fear. Like I wasn't even a threat to her lies anymore. Like my anger was nothing she couldn't outtalk or outlast. I closed my eyes and remembered the video. The way she looked at him. Not just the kissing. Not just the laughing. But the look. That softness. That warmth. The face she used to save for me, it wasn't mine anymore. I had to go back. Eventually. The dog needed to be fed. I'd left the house in such a haze I hadn't thought about anything. But I wasn't going back without a plan. I drove to my friend Mason's place instead. He lived on the edge of town in a 2-bedroom bachelor cave with leather couches and video game consoles he never used. When I knocked, he opened the door shirtless, holding a burrito, looked at my face once and said, "You want to tell me why you look like you've seen Satan getting a lap dance in your living room?" So I told him. The whole thing. Not just what happened that morning, but everything. How she'd been pulling away for months. How I'd caught little things, weird receipts, sudden interest in her appearance, how she used to leave her phone around and now took it everywhere like it was a newborn baby. Mason didn't say much. He listened. And when I was done, he handed me a beer and said, "You want to stay here tonight?" I nodded. He gave me his room. Slept on the couch. And that night, I laid on someone else's bed, staring at someone else's ceiling, thinking about 100 different things, where she was, if the guy from the video was at her place now, what she'd tell people if I just vanished. I thought about our wedding. Her smile. The vows she whispered like they were spells. And then I thought about how quickly she broke every single one of them. Around 2 a.m., another message lit up my phone. "I'm sorry if you feel hurt. I didn't mean for you to find out like that." That sentence didn't even make sense. Not sorry I cheated. Not sorry I lied. Just sorry I found out. I didn't reply. But in that moment, something shifted. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. I wasn't going to play the quiet husband anymore. I wasn't going to wait for apologies that came with disclaimers. If she wanted to treat this like a game, fine. But she forgot something important. I know how to finish what other people start. And I wasn't done. By morning, the cold clarity from the night before had solidified into something sharp. No more confusion. No more pacing circles around what happened or wondering what I'd done wrong. The storm had passed, but it left behind a strange kind of calm. Not peace, something colder. Focus. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to pull the thread she thought I'd never find. At 7:13 a.m. I got a new message from her. "Are we seriously doing this now? Can we just talk like adults before you make this worse?" That line, "before you make this worse," said everything. She was still trying to frame herself as the victim of my reaction. Still treating it like a speed bump in our week instead of a full demolition of our marriage. I didn't respond. Instead, I made coffee at Mason's, borrowed one of his hoodies, and sat down at his old laptop. I had one goal. Find out who the guy was. The one from the footage. I'd seen his face, and I had one advantage. She wasn't careful. Brittany had been bold. Too bold. She didn't think I had the spine to dig. So I started digging. Took less than 30 minutes. I pulled her phone number from an old shared document we used for budgeting. That number was still linked to her cloud storage, and thanks to her lazy habit of reusing passwords, I guessed it in 2 tries. Inside that account was a backup of her calendar. That's where I found it. An entry titled "Lunch with R" repeated weekly. Every Tuesday. It had been going on for 3 months. And R wasn't just a letter. It was short for Ryan Keller. I recognized the name. He wasn't a stranger. He was a real estate agent. A guy we met at a barbecue hosted by one of her college friends. I remembered him because he was loud, had too many teeth when he smiled, and tried to sell me a lake house I didn't want. I thought he was annoying. She said he was harmless. I scrolled through more entries. The pattern was disgusting. Lunches. Meetings. One weird note that just said "get wine plus shower." That was from a Friday night, I remembered. She told me she was staying late at work to finish a deadline. She came home flushed and humming. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. Ryan Keller. I opened a new tab and looked him up. His professional website was exactly what you'd expect. Soft lighting, forced charm, empty words about trust and commitment. But the real gold was his business Instagram. Public. Too public. He had photos in front of fancy houses, posed in his overpriced suits, and in the background of one photo, dated 2 weeks ago, was my car. My Jeep. Blurred in the distance, parked near the sidewalk, unmistakable by the dent on the rear bumper. That was it. The proof was everywhere. Sloppy, arrogant, out in the open. And now that I knew his name, I wasn't just mad. I was curious. I wanted to know what kind of man helps someone destroy a marriage like it's a Tuesday errand. So I called him. Blocked number. He picked up. "This is Ryan," he said, chipper, like he was talking to a new client. I didn't answer. There was a pause. "Hello?" Still nothing from me. I wanted him to feel it. That cold press of silence. Then I said, "She's mine, you know." A longer pause. Then he said, "Who is this?" "She's my wife. The one you've been playing pretend with in my car." Another beat of silence. He didn't hang up. Didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "I swear, look, man, I didn't know she was married." That was the moment I felt something snap in my chest. Because he did. He'd met me. We shook hands. We talked about mortgages and gas prices. He looked me in the face and smiled like he wasn't a termite crawling into my foundation. "She told me you were separated," he added. "Said you lived in the same house but it was over." I couldn't even speak for a second. Not from disbelief. From rage. She told him we were separated. That I was just some background prop in her new storyline. I said one word before hanging up, "You'll regret this." And I meant it. Because now it wasn't just about her. Now there were two names on the list. And I hadn't even started. By the time I drove back into town, I wasn't the same man who stood in that mechanic's office watching his life collapse in pixelated silence. That man was stunned. Numb. Staggering through disbelief. The man pulling into our driveway now, he was something different. I don't know if there's a name for it, but if there is, it sits somewhere between surgical and savage. She wasn't home. Of course she wasn't. I didn't expect her to be. The house was too clean, like it was trying to pretend nothing had happened. But you can't Febreze betrayal out of your couch cushions. Her scent was still everywhere. I stood in our kitchen, looking at the little glass jar where we kept dog treats and realized she hadn't fed the dog. Again. I took care of it. Took care of everything. That's what I'd always done. While she played dress up in someone else's arms, I was the one holding the bones of this life together. Laundry. Groceries. Bills. She'd outsourced all of it. Said she was too mentally drained from work, from social obligations, from carrying the emotional weight of our relationship. Her words, not mine. Turns out that weight was just the silence between lies. I walked into the bedroom, sat on her side of the bed, opened her nightstand drawer and found it instantly. Her second phone. The one she thought I didn't know about. She used it for work. Said she needed it to keep her clients separate. I never believed that, but I never pushed it. That's how she kept me. Passive. Trusting. The good guy. Well, the good guy just unlocked her second life. The messages weren't just with Ryan. He wasn't the first. He was just the longest running. The most convenient. There were others, flings, flirts, one conversation with a guy saved as Derek, yoga. And the way she spoke to them, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't experimental. It was casual. Confident. Like she'd been doing this for years. I dropped the phone on the bed, walked into the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. Not to cry. Not to self-pity. I was studying my own face like I'd forgotten who I was. And I remembered something, a conversation from last year during her friend Dana's birthday. Brittany had too much wine, leaned over the table, and laughed as she told Dana it's all about controlling the story. If you control the story, no one can touch you. That's when it clicked. That's what she was doing. Not just cheating. She was building narratives. Stories. Versions of reality to feed people so she could move through the world untouched, unquestioned. So I decided to write a story of my own. I took photos of everything, the texts, the calendar entries, the dash cam footage. I uploaded it all to a private drive. Labeled it for Brittany. Then I printed a single still frame from the dash cam, the one of Ryan kissing her in my car, and taped it to our fridge with a note. "If I was dull, you should have just left. Now you'll watch everything unravel." I left the house. I didn't know where she was, but I had a good idea of where she'd go, Orion's office. His Instagram said he had a showing that afternoon. I wasn't planning anything stupid. I wasn't going to yell or throw punches. I wanted something simpler. I wanted her to see me walk in, to feel the shift, to understand that the version of me who would tolerate being discarded like a used tissue was dead and buried. And when I got there, when I parked across the street and waited, I saw her car. She was inside. Not with Ryan. Alone. And I walked in. The moment our eyes met, I didn't need a speech. She looked up from the desk she wasn't supposed to be behind. Her mouth opened slightly. Her fingers paused over her phone. That flicker of panic? That was all I needed. No shouting. No drama. I just smiled, a calm, deliberate, slow smile, and said, "You should go check the fridge." Then I turned and left. And for the first time in months, the weight I'd been carrying, the confusion, the pain, the silence started to lift. Because now the story was mine. I went off-grid after that. Turned off my phone. Deleted my socials. I didn't want her calls. I didn't want her friends trying to guilt me into talking things through. I didn't want to explain my version of the story while she crafted hers in parallel like a PR campaign. I wasn't interested in negotiating with the arsonist while the house was still burning. I stayed at Mason's a few more nights. He didn't ask questions. Just kept the fridge stocked and the TV on mute. Every now and then he'd glance over like he wanted to say something, crack a joke, maybe, but he didn't. He just let the silence stay where it belonged, like a bandage over something still bleeding. 3 days in, she showed up. She knocked on Mason's door like she owned it. I watched her through the peephole. Her hair was a mess. She wore a sweater she used to sleep in back when things were real between us. No makeup. She didn't look broken, she looked busy. Like someone preparing for a presentation she didn't quite memorize. I didn't open. She knocked again. And again. Then her voice, muffled through the door, "Please. I just want to talk. I know I handled it badly. I know. But you ambushed me. You didn't give me a chance." That was the line that broke something in me all over again. I ambushed her. She cheated. Lied. Gaslit me for months. And now I was the villain because I refused to play dead when the truth hit the floor. I opened the door. Didn't say a word. Just stood there. She exhaled. Like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Thank you. Look, I know this is a mess. Okay? But I never wanted to hurt you. It got out of hand." Her voice was trembling. She was performing grief now. Playing the role of the remorseful wife. I watched her eyes. There wasn't shame. There was strategy. She was calculating every word. Reading my body language, trying to find a crack she could squeeze through. "You never wanted to hurt me," I repeated slowly. "So all those messages. All the times you snuck off. That was you protecting me?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I thought maybe I could keep both things. You and that. I didn't want to blow up our life. I thought I could figure it out." I stepped outside. Closed the door behind me. We stood on Mason's porch in the cold. Our breath visible between us. "You were going to keep doing it," I said. "Weren't you? Until I found out. That's the only reason we're even having this conversation." "I was going to end it," she insisted. "With him." I was. "With which one?" I asked. That stopped her. Just a second. But I saw it. That little crack in the performance. The one she couldn't cover fast enough. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because she finally realized the depth of what I knew. "I went through the second phone," I said. "The one in the drawer. Derek from yoga says hi." Her face paled. For the first time, she looked caught. "That was different," she whispered. "It wasn't emotional." That sentence landed like a punch in my stomach. Not emotional. Like it was some kind of discount betrayal. I stepped closer. Not to intimidate her. Just to make sure she saw the difference in my eyes now. "I want you out of the house by the end of the week." Her mouth opened, panic rushing in. "Wait, no, we don't have to. Please, can't we just..." I cut her off. "You didn't just cheat on me. You lied to me for months. You let me believe I was safe with you while you used me as a backup plan." She reached out like she might touch my arm. "But we can fix this." "No," I said, stepping back. "You broke it. And I'm not taping it back together so you can sleep better." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw something real, not love, not guilt, fear. Not of me. Of consequence. Of losing control of the story. I turned, walked back inside, and left her standing on the porch in that pathetic sweater, arms wrapped around herself, alone for the first time in a very, very long time. And it felt like the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. But I knew one thing. It was mine. The day she moved out was unceremonious. No tears, no final embrace, no begging at the threshold. She came when she knew I'd be gone, probably coached by someone, maybe her sister or one of those friends who always told her she could do better. She took half the stuff she bought and left everything she didn't want. I came home to a house that felt ransacked, but in slow motion, furniture slightly shifted, drawers missing their favorite spoons, closet hangers swaying like ghosts of the life that used to hang there. She didn't even leave a note. Just a row of empty hangers and the faint smell of her perfume still clinging to the bathroom towel rack like it didn't realize she wasn't coming back. I walked through each room like a stranger. Sat on the bed, my bed now, and stared at the space where her things used to be. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even loneliness. It was something more surgical. Like walking through the aftermath of a storm and realizing not everything was destroyed, just everything that mattered. The dog kept pacing by the front door, waiting for her. He whined once. Then never again. That evening I opened the drive folder, the one I'd labeled for Brittany. Not to use it, but to remind myself it was there. Insurance. Truth. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't made it all up. I'd seen how stories can bend in the wrong hands, and I knew hers would be halfway to polished already. A few hours later, I got a message from her mother. Not a call. A text. I'm not taking sides. But just know she's hurting too. I didn't respond. People kept doing that, reaching out like I'd been in a fender bender and not a slow-motion collision with someone I'd built a life with. Like her pain was some kind of equal exchange for mine. Like we were both just going through something. But they didn't have the footage. They didn't hear the laughter in that car or the way she said, leaving it at Joe's will make it look real. They didn't know that she kissed another man with the same mouth she used to whisper how safe she felt with me. The next few days were logistics. Canceling joint subscriptions. Transferring the lease on the second car. Freezing the shared bank account before she could drain it. She tried to challenge it, said I was being petty. Said I was punishing her. Punishing. As if boundaries after betrayal were an act of cruelty. Then came the group chat. One of her friends, Talia, tried to play peacekeeper. Started a group text with both of us and a message so fake sweet it made my teeth ache. Hey guys. I know things are messy, but let's try not to be toxic. We're adults, right? I left the group immediately. Because what no one seemed to understand was that I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. I started noticing things, how quiet the house could be without her chaos echoing off every wall. How peaceful mornings felt without passive-aggressive sighs over coffee. How freeing it was to know that I didn't have to pretend anymore. Didn't have to shrink myself to fit inside whatever story she was telling that week. One night, I pulled up Ryan Keller's website again. It was gone. Just a 404 error. His Instagram too. Deleted. Disappeared like it never existed. I found out later, through a friend of a friend, that his wife had found out. Yeah. Wife. Married. 2 kids. His story was even messier than mine. Apparently, she used the footage I'd uploaded to the drive. Sent it to everyone. Ryan lost more than just a fling. He lost custody. His house. His job. Brittany had picked a man just as careless as she was. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not even for a second. Because while he was off fumbling through secrets and cheap kisses, I was rebuilding. Slowly, quietly, but stronger this time, because I wasn't the same man she left behind. And the best part? She didn't see that coming. It's strange how fast people reappear when they sense the drama has cooled. Like vultures circling lower once the smoke clears. That week, I started getting the polite texts, the check-ins. People who hadn't messaged me in months suddenly wanted to catch up. I knew what it was. They weren't worried. They were curious, hungry for the inside scoop. Everyone loves a front row seat to someone else's collapse. What they didn't realize was that there was no collapse. Not anymore. There was only rebuild. One night, I got a message from Brittany again. After almost a week of silence. I've been thinking, maybe we rushed this. Rushed? That word echoed in my chest like an insult. We didn't rush. She ran. She sprinted toward lies, then walked slowly back when reality didn't look as sweet on the other side. I didn't answer. 3 hours later, she followed up. I'm not saying we go back to how it was. Just that, maybe we talk. Figure out what this means. That was her new tactic. Ambiguity. If she couldn't control the story anymore, she'd try to blur it, create just enough confusion to slip through. But I knew better now. I could smell the strategy in her punctuation. So I wrote back a single line. You don't get to rewrite the ending just because you don't like it. Read. No reply. A few days after that, I ran into her brother, Nate, at a gas station of all places. We used to be close. Played poker, grilled on weekends, trash-talked each other's taste in movies. He saw me and stiffened like I was holding a lit fuse. He approached cautiously. Hey, haven't seen you since, he trailed off. I filled the silence. Since your sister torched her marriage in my car? Yeah. Been a minute. He winced. Look, I don't want to get in the middle. She's going through something. I stared at him. You know she cheated, right? He looked away. She told us you two were drifting apart. That things were basically over. Right? I said, stepping forward. So over that she needed to lie about where she was every Tuesday, hide a second phone, and keep wearing her ring the whole time. Nate didn't speak. So I leaned in, calm, low. Next time she rewrites history, remind her some of us still own the original script. He nodded once. Quiet. Almost ashamed. I left him there at pump 6, clutching his receipt like it was going to explain something. That's when I realized how many people around her had let it happen. Not because they were evil, but because it was easier. Easier to believe her charm, her jokes, her "you don't understand how hard it is" routine. Brittany was an expert at playing the victim in advance, laying the emotional groundwork so that when the truth eventually surfaced, she already had a defense built. But the one thing she never prepared for? Me learning how to stop defending her. That week, I changed the locks. Not out of fear. Out of finality. And when I saw her name on the caller ID again, I didn't pick up. I let the silence answer for me. Because silence now wasn't weakness. It was choice. It was power. It was the sound of a door that used to stay cracked finally slamming shut. It was a quiet Saturday when I got the letter. Yes, a letter. Handwritten. Folded neatly in a plain white envelope with no return address, just my name scribbled in a rushed, familiar hand. I found it tucked under the doormat when I stepped out to walk the dog. For a second, I thought maybe it was from a neighbor, some passive-aggressive complaint about trash cans or lawn height. But as soon as I opened it, I knew. It was from her. For pages. No greeting. No apology. Just a stream of consciousness soaked in justifications, half-truths, and emotional bait. She said she'd been lost for a long time, that being with me made her feel safe but invisible. That she never meant to fall for someone else, a phrase so stale it should have crumbled in her pen. She tried to say Ryan wasn't a betrayal, just a mistake. A moment. A temporary distraction. She said she was waking up now, seeing everything clearly. She hoped I could too. And then, buried near the end, came the real twist, the plea disguised as grace. I'm not asking to get back together. I just want to be in your life, even if it's as a friend. We were something important. That doesn't just disappear, right? I sat there on the porch with that letter in my hand, feeling something I didn't expect. Laughter. It bubbled up so sharp and sudden it almost scared me. Because it wasn't joyful. It wasn't even bitter. It was disbelief. At the audacity. At the sheer delusion of thinking friendship could be built on the wreckage of trust she personally set fire to. Friendship? With the woman who desecrated our marriage in my car and called me dramatic for being upset? Friendship is built on respect. And she'd spent months chipping at mine until there was nothing left but dust and obligation. I didn't respond. I didn't even keep the letter. I burned it. Right there in Mason's old fire pit, watched it curl and blacken into ash until her handwriting disappeared, until the words that once held power had no oxygen left to survive. And in that silence, real, warm, earned silence, I felt something settle in me. Not closure. That's a word people use when they want endings to feel poetic. What I felt was more like completion. The wheel had turned all the way around. I had confronted her lies. Pulled the truth into the light. Survived the shrapnel. Walked through the flames. And now? Now I was sitting at the edge of the mess, unscarred where she hoped I'd be shattered. In a way, the letter was a gift. Not because of what it said, but because of what it proved. She still needed me to validate her version of things. Still thought she could soften the story, ease the guilt, stay in orbit around my life like some benign planet. But what she didn't realize, she wasn't a planet anymore. She was a falling star. Bright, dramatic, beautiful on the way down. But already gone, the final thing I did was something small. Deliberate. I changed my number. No dramatic texts. No cryptic goodbye. Just gone. A clean break. Like cutting a rope that had been fraying for months but still somehow tethered me to her in all the invisible ways. It felt surgical. Cold. But there's peace in clarity. And clarity doesn't need a conversation. People always talk about healing like it's some slow, poetic montage, yoga mats, sunsets, deep breaths on mountaintops. But healing, for me, came in stranger places. Like doing laundry without resentment. Like opening the fridge and not seeing that almond milk she insisted on even though she never drank it. Like sleeping diagonally on the bed and realizing there was no one there to roll away from anymore. I stopped checking her socials. Not out of discipline, out of boredom. I didn't care what she was wearing, or which cafe she was fake laughing in this week, or what hollow caption she'd paired with a photo that cropped out the part of her life where truth used to live. Whatever she posted wasn't for me. It was for the people who didn't know better. But I did. I knew the script behind her smile. I knew what it cost to keep up her act. And more than anything, I knew she'd never really be free from it. Because people like her, they don't move on. They move around. From host to host. From story to story. Spinning new versions of themselves until they forget which one is real. If any of them ever were. Me? I moved through it. I let myself feel the betrayal. The humiliation. The anger. The absurdity of watching someone you love look you in the eyes and call their destruction of your trust a moment of confusion. I sat with it. Let it burn through me, and then I got up, because I'm not just the man she cheated on. I'm the man who outlived her lies. And I mean that literally. A few weeks ago, I walked into a bookstore. One I hadn't been to in years. I wasn't looking for anything. Just wandering. Killing time. A soft rain had just started outside, and the place was almost empty. There was a woman in the philosophy aisle. Reading the back of a paperback. She looked up when I passed, and smiled. Not a performative smile. Not one meant for attention or manipulation. Just a quiet, curious, human smile. I smiled back, and kept walking. I wasn't ready for anything. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward it. Whatever it was. So, if you're reading this because you're in the middle of it, the betrayal, the unraveling, the silence, the second-guessing, I'll leave you with this. You don't have to win the argument. You don't have to get the perfect apology. You don't even have to make them see what they did. You just have to survive it. And eventually, you will. And on the other side, you'll find something better than justice. You'll find yourself again. And trust me, that's the one person worth staying loyal to.